Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. I've got some really good news today. This is fucking fantastic. Jessica Valenti has written an article telling us that there isn't really a war on men, which is fantastic news. We can all rest, we can take it easy. Apparently we don't need to worry about feminists attacking men or masculinity anymore. Because, you know, Jessica wouldn't lie to us. She wouldn't misrepresent things or tell us half-truths or anything like that. Because she's a journalist, and we can totally trust journalists, can't we? I think. Anyway, considering she's taken a great deal of time to write this article, at least 5 minutes, I think we should go through it and have a look at it and really consider her arguments, because I'm sure they're top-notch. So the article is called, "There is no war on men, but maybe there should be." Ah, jeez. It's women's lives that are getting ruined. Yes, well, they're the only ones we're able to be concerned about, right? Lucky no men have ever had their lives ruined in the history of mankind. It's only the poor women, and all women, because that's what patriarchy does. She says, "Conservatives are awfully worried about the war on men." Yeah, Jessica, and they're not the only ones. But anyway, to hear them tell it, there's an angry mob of feminists eager to ruin men's lives for the sole reason of... In fact, they never quite say. Well, you haven't been listening, have you, Jessica? The reason why feminists want to ruin the lives of men is because they use men as a scapegoat. Men are the bad guys. Men are the ones who do all the bad things, and women are their saintly, innocent victims who have never done a thing wrong. Unless, of course, a woman does something wrong, in which case it's not really her fault, it's the fault of a man somewhere. It's called scapegoating. You know, there was this guy called Adolf Hitler. You may have heard of him. He was around in this thing called World War II, and he and the Nazis did it to the Jews, you know. And that's not the only example of scapegoating throughout history. In fact, history is fucking full of people scapegoating other people and other groups. So yeah, the reasoning is pretty clear, Jessica. Next. But the boys of America should watch out. Parents should arm their prodigal sons with body cameras and consent forms. Their livelihoods depend on it. Well, the interesting thing, Jessica, is that there are numerous cases of false rape allegations which have been proven to be false because someone happened to have a camera recording at the time. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone walks around 24 hours a day with a body camera, but you know, it doesn't hurt to record certain interactions, especially if you're a taxi driver.
An Edmonton cab driver is suing 4 female passengers for accusations they made against him. The girls tried to accuse the man of sexual assault, a move he says could have ruined his life. Scott Frolick has more.
Owner Yesa actually had the camera hanging from his rearview mirror in his cab, had signs around the cab saying, "You are on camera, I am recording." Despite that, when the girls got into the cab outside a local bar, they started to want to smoke, which is illegal. Soner pointed that out and said, "You cannot light up, it'll be a $500 fine." There was some swear words thrown around. At that point, he got to the destination the girls wanted. It was a $13 fare. The girls said, "We're not going to pay." He threatened to call the police. That's when the girls said to the bystanders nearby that the cab driver had tried to assault them. They called police. But I want you to listen and watch the girls inside the cab. You can see some of the videotape for yourself. Here it is.
No, you. I'm not paying for you.
Now, after the police arrived at the scene, they talked with everybody involved, and that's when the cab driver said, "I've got tape of this incident. Come take a look." The police did. They looked at the tape, they reviewed the tape, and they said there would be no charges. They had no evidence of any kind of assault, sexual or otherwise here. There are no charges. But that's when Soner Yesa said, "Well, what about my reputation? Had I not had this tape," he told me, "I would have been probably charged. I would have lost my marriage. I could have lost and would have lost my job just based on the charges, no matter what happened after that." So he wanted the girls charged. Police decided, though, to close down the case, saying there wasn't enough evidence either way. So now he's looking for a civil remedy, and he is looking for $60,000 in damages from those girls.
As for consent forms, they're really not worth the paper they're printed on, because sure, someone can sign a consent form and agree to certain types of sex or whatever, but during the actual sexual act, they're free to withdraw consent at any time. And if they claim to have withdrawn consent and the other person continued anyway, then that is considered rape, regardless of whether they signed the consent form beforehand. So, yeah, consent forms are rather pointless. I know it was a feminist thing for about 5 minutes a few years ago. I think there was an app that was created by a feminist or something.
It's a sexual consent app, and these have been around for years. But essentially what happens, two people are getting hot and heated. One pulls out a phone and say, hey, read this contract, initial here, let me take your photo, state your name for the record, sign here, and now let's get it on.
It's kind of a mood killer.
It is complete mood killer. But the idea here, the creators say, is you're creating a legal binding document of consent and intent. They put these things together specifically for college campuses to combat what they say is the problem of sexual assault on campus. You eliminate any ambiguity here. It's clear of your consent and intent, and you're making a record of it.
But there are a lot of issues with apps like this. There's another one called Good to Go.
Yeah.
That one shut down.
Yeah.
There are a lot of concern. One concern that I personally, when I read it, I said, well, what if somebody's in and they say no after they do this?
Change their mind.
That is the biggest issue that people have. Several issues that are obvious, but that's the biggest one. What if you change your mind? Then you are then giving essentially a potential rapist evidence to exonerate themselves later on because you give consent. It gives you no way to go back and change your mind. Also, these things are created here. I mean, what person, people think it's ridiculous, in the heat of the moment, two hormonal people are going to stop and say, let's read this contract and fill it out. That's another problem.
So critics say it's not legally binding.
Well, the ones that put it together say it absolutely is. We don't have a test case yet. But these things, once you upload the information, it goes to a server that only police can access, a disciplinary board at a school, or by subpoena.
Wow. Jen Ashton, so let's bring her in on this. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's probably a good idea and well-intentioned, but let's talk about the fact the name Sassy is almost a play on words to say yes, right? And I don't think we need any more of this in the bed, so probably more problems than good things.
Yeah, I think in theory it sounds good, but I just think execution may be lacking.
And they want to just start the conversation. Even if it's just not about the consent, at least it gets two people to talk about affirmative consent and what it really means.
Absolutely.
So the really ironic thing about this app is it was kind of predicted by a really schlocky sci-fi movie from 1988. Yeah, I don't think I really need to say any more. I'm just going to play the clip and let you make up your own minds.
Let's do it.
This is it, Sam. Flesh and blood. All you gotta do is a little paperwork, some song and dance, and then you're home free. Women, Sam. Real women.
Looks hot. Let's get it down on paper.
Now you stick your tongue in my client's mouth and I'm gonna sue your ass off.
Deal breaker.
Okay. Let's see. Talking about a standard one-night arrangement, right?
I guess. Yeah.
Right, so we'll say a dinner, complete sexual encounter, full penetration, optional episode in the morning, right?
Just slow down.
You know, I personally thought it would be nice.
Let me see this. My lawyer better see this one. For instance, the oral clause here seems a little sticky.
It's minor. Minor point. We can work it out in bed.
Hey, you work it out in bed, because I'm not gonna be there. No deal, no deal.
Next. Here's the sad truth. If feminists were actually waging a war on the men who do very bad things, the facts suggest we'd be losing miserably. No. I'm going to say no. First of all, feminists are not waging a war on men who do very bad things. They are, in fact, waging a war on men in general and masculinity in particular. And feminists are not losing miserably. They actually have strongholds in education, in the media, and in the government. Now, that's not to say that they haven't been losing a lot of battles lately, and they most definitely are on the defensive. But the war is most definitely not over, and it will take decades and decades to repair the damage to things like the educational system, universities in particular. So yeah, I wouldn't say losing miserably, but most definitely have taken a number of blows in recent years and will continue to do so. Next. Men accused of sexual wrongdoing reside in both the White House and the highest court in the land. Yes, the key word here is accused, not found guilty. Next. Of the dozens of high-profile abusive men outed by Me Too over the last year, only a handful have faced real consequences, which is to say they've lost their jobs, and only one has gone to jail. Okay, first of all, I'd say it's more than a handful have lost their jobs. Just look at Hollywood, look at male feminists in the media. There's been quite a few of them who have lost their jobs. So, yeah, more than a handful have lost their jobs. Second of all, we're talking about accusations over social media, not court cases where evidence has been presented and people have due process rights. So the question should be, should anyone lose their job or face real consequences based on an accusation over social media? That's the real question here. It doesn't matter if it's 2 people or 1,000 people. Obviously it's worse if it's 1,000, but regardless, the point is no one should face consequences without due process rights. And by the way, I'm just going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here and mention that I actually met Jessica Valenti once. I was walking down by the river. Now, I can't remember which river it was or when it was, but, you know, you'll just have to take my word for it. And I saw her with a sack filled with black babies, which she was drowning. Oh, what's that? You want proof? Well, clearly you're a racist because you are supporting the killing of black babies. Not to mention, I think some of the babies may have been gay and some of them may have been female. So I guess you're a homophobe and a misogynist as well. How dare you ask questions and ask for evidence? Don't you know we're living in a post-evidence society? Moving on. National statistics trend in step. Rapists rarely go to jail and men who harass women rarely face censure. So it begs the question, why all the bluster over how accusations are ruining innocent lives? Okay, now I want to spend a little bit of time looking at one of Jessica's citations because it's really interesting and it tells a lot about how feminists misuse statistics and they don't really care about the process. They just care about the supposed end result, even if that end result is biased or wrong. So the link takes us to some statistics from RAIN, and it's got the criminal justice system statistics. The vast majority of perpetrators will not go to jail or prison. Now, note the term perpetrators. These are people who have not been found guilty in a court of law. So it stands to reason that at least some of them are not perpetrators. It goes on to say, out of every 1,000 rapes, 994 perpetrators will walk free. Well, let's correct this. Out of every 1,000 alleged rapes, 994 alleged perpetrators will walk free. Now, the first statistic is very, very interesting. And it's what really destroys this entire argument. It says here, 310 are reported to the police. Yeah, so that means 690, which is over 2/3, are not reported to the police. Now, obviously, if 2/3 of a particular crime are not reported to the police, it cannot end in incarceration or an arrest or even an investigation. Okay? If you want an investigation, a court case, and a conviction, including jail time, you need to fucking report it to the police. They're not going to magically disappear and reappear in jail one day. The world doesn't work that way. So we can automatically disregard 2/3 of this statistic, of this 1,000 rapes. And the real number we should be looking at is 310. Now, it's not as good an argument if you're talking about 310 reports as opposed to 1,000 supposed, alleged rapes. Now, the next statistic is, out of the 310, 57 reports lead to arrest. So that's somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 6. Now, why is it somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 6 as opposed to, 100%? Well, there's numerous reasons. First of all, in some cases, they simply can't find the perpetrator. Now, you can't arrest someone and put them in jail if you can't locate the person who's done the crime. And then there's false allegations. Once again, if something is proven to be a false allegation, you can't arrest that person and put them in jail. Then there are cases which are dropped by the person making the allegation. And then there are cases dropped by the police because there's not enough evidence that a crime actually took place. So there's lots of reasons why there's only 57 out of every 310. Now, out of the 57, we go down to 11 cases get referred to the prosecutor, which is once again about 1 in 5. And once again, there are numerous reasons why these cases are sometimes dropped. Often, the person will withdraw the allegation and not want to go through the process, or the prosecutor thinks that they can't win. Now, out of 11 cases referred to the prosecutor, 7 cases lead to a felony conviction. Now, that's a pretty high conviction rate. And out of those 7 convictions, 6 rapists will be incarcerated. So what happens to number 7? Why does number 7 not get incarcerated? Well, if I had to guess, I would say number 7 is probably a female. There have been numerous female rapists, including many female teachers, who have walked free with nothing more than a warning because, they're female, right? Of course, there could be numerous other reasons as well. Okay, now let's compare these statistics to the other statistics that RAINN gives us. It's got here, out of 1,000 robberies, 619 are reported to the police. Now, can you see a big difference immediately? With rapes, 1/3 are reported to the police. With robberies, 2/3 are reported to police. And surprise, surprise, what a shock. More people are convicted when more robberies are reported. What a surprise. I mean, who would have thought that if a crime is reported more often, that there are more convictions? That is just astounding. Out of 619 reports to the police, there are 167 arrests. So let's do some math. And that's roughly 1 in 4. So, yeah, the odds are a bit better than with a rape case. So out of 167 arrests, 37 get referred to the prosecutor, which is somewhere between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. And out of those cases that are referred to the prosecutor, 22 will lead to a felony conviction. And out of those 22 cases, 20 will be incarcerated. What's the bet that the 2 who aren't are female? And if you think I'm joking, need I remind you of the sentencing gap? And of course, RAINN also shows us statistics for assault and battery crimes. So out of 1,000 assaults and batteries, 627 are reported to the police. Once again, 2/3. What a surprise! 2/3 of a crime are reported to the police as opposed to 1/3, and it leads to more convictions. What an astounding finding we have here. Now, out of 627 reports to the police, 255 lead to an arrest, and out of that, 105 cases get referred to the prosecutor, 41 cases will lead to felony conviction, and 33 criminals will be incarcerated. Okay, so why is it that incarceration for assault and battery is so much higher than robbery and rape? Well, if I were to speculate, I would say because a lot of assaults happen in public. Now, sure, there's a lot of assaults that happen in private as well, but rapes almost entirely happen in private between two people. Assaults often happen in public, especially if they involve alcohol. You'll see the number of arrests for assault and battery go up Friday and Saturday nights when people have been drinking. They get into an argument with someone, or, you know, you all know the story. You all know what happens. I don't need to explain it to you. But surely something being done in public, or more likely to be done in public with witnesses, is more likely to lead to an arrest, especially if police turn up while it's happening. Absolute shock. These statistics have just blown me away. They've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that clearly we live in a patriarchy that just hates women, as opposed to, you know, comparing apples and oranges. But, you know, feminists would never misrepresent things, would they? Next. Conservative men know that their safety, their personal lives and their livelihoods aren't in danger. Not really. Then what's the point of people coming forward and making public allegations? We're told that it's a hard thing to do, and it can lead to the person making the allegation themselves being attacked and criticised, and it's stressful for them. So if there's no result in them coming forward and pointing the finger at the person who supposedly raped them, then why do it? It seems to be a pointless endeavour. It would mean that the entire Me Too movement has failed, hasn't it? If these men aren't facing any consequences? Or could it be that Jessica Valenti is downplaying the actual harm which is done to people being accused because she knows that it violates due process rights, and that having mob justice on social media isn't really all that civilised, is it? But their power is. Their power fades, albeit slowly, with every protest, every new voter registration, and every time a woman comes forward to say she's been hurt by one of them. Well, hold on a second. You just said a second ago that it doesn't have any effect on their lives, and now you're saying that it's taking the power away from them. Which one is it, Jessica? Is it not affecting them, or is it actually affecting them? Because you seem to be edging your bets here a little bit. Next. And since many of these men believe that their power is an inalienable right, that threat of losing it can feel like annihilation. Yeah, okay. Next. That's why so many powerful white conservative men are now adopting the language of victimization, fueling the backlash against feminist progress. Okay, are the black male athletes who have been falsely accused of rape and lost their place in numerous universities across America, are they powerful white conservative men as well, Jessica? Or are you excluding them because they don't support your argument? Lindsey Graham said, "I'm a single white male from South Carolina, and I'm told that I should just shut up." Are you suggesting, Jessica, that the right to express an opinion should be based on someone's gender and race? Because that doesn't sound very progressive, does it? I mean, that sounds regressive when you think about it. Next. President Donald Trump said the sexual assault survivors protesting Judge Brett Kavanaugh were paid activists attacking a good man. Well, I don't know about the protesters. I don't know whether they were paid. I think you don't really need to pay protesters to protest something like that. I think you'll get plenty of volunteers who have drank the poison Kool-Aid. However, there are plenty of paid activists in the media, just like Jessica Valenti, for example. She's not really a journalist, she's a paid activist. That's what she's doing here. She's being paid to do her activism. None of this is actual journalism. But anyway, let's continue. These men, so accustomed to getting their way without protest, truly believe men are being wronged. Well, I would argue that it's feminists who are used to getting their way without protest. For the last 40 years, anyone who has spoken up against them has been called a misogynist. And it's a good way to silence people. Men don't want to be called misogynists. They don't want to be thought of as women haters. So a lot of people have just shut up over the last 40 or 50 years and taken it. But the thing is, the feminist movement has used that word and other words so often that it's lost its power. Those words have lost their power, and now people have had enough and they're fighting back. So it's actually feminists who are accustomed to getting their way without protest. But times, they are a-changing. Next. And they want the rest of America to feel the same way. A few years ago, an anti-rape activist described it to me like this: if you've been living in an apartment with a tilted floor your whole life, it can feel uneven once the floor is finally leveled. Yeah. What if you're living in an echo chamber though, Jessica? What happens then? What happens when someone like myself comes along and rips away the veil of your echo chamber and you're forced to confront the real world? What's it feel like, Jessica? Can you tell us? It must feel pretty oppressive. Although you wouldn't know what real oppression is, would you? Next. But this victim posturing isn't just about a fear of losing the upper hand. It's strategic. This is the way that power protects itself when challenged on its abuses, tweeted the feminist writer Rebecca Traister, author of the new book, Good and Mad. Yes, because when women are mad and angry about things, that's justified, because they're fighting the patriarchy. But when men are angry and mad about things, well, they're dangerous, or they're losers. Isn't that right, Jessica? Next. New Yorker writer Gia Tolentino made a similar observation. Like the white supremacists who marched in Charlottesville, these men are borrowing the rhetoric of the structurally oppressed and delivering it with a rage that is denied to all but the most powerful. Yeah, once again, when men get angry, they're losers who are dangerous. When women get angry, well, they're brave warriors fighting for progress. Next. That rage has been on full display these last few weeks. It was there in the stadium full of Trump supporters chanting, "Lock her up," at yet another woman who had gotten on the president's bad side. It was there during a local political debate in Minnesota, where Republican incumbent Dwayne Guam violently grabbed the microphone out of his female challenger's hand. There is a raw fear and anger on display from men who simply cannot stomach the notion that women should have a voice in politics. In a hearing or on a debate stage, how dare we? Well, that's interesting considering you're against white men having a voice, Jessica. Projection, I think. Next. This week, as the men who enact laws and create national policy cast themselves as put-upon victims, a mother of 6 in Kansas was shot to death by the abusive husband. Friends say she was trying to leave. The majority of women killed in the US will be murdered by a partner or spouse. So we have this lie again. Now, I know some people might accuse me of being pedantic, but it's important that I am in this case. The majority of women killed in the US will not be murdered by a partner or spouse. Now, you might argue the majority of women murdered in the US will be murdered by a partner or spouse. But being murdered is different than being killed. If you are killed in a plane crash or a car accident, you are not murdered in a plane crash or a car accident. So the majority of women killed in the US are not murdered, full stop, let alone murdered by a partner or spouse. In fact, this is something I've looked at extensively in recent months, and I've shown statistics from here in Australia which show that women are 10 times more likely to kill themselves than to be murdered by a partner. I suspect we would find very similar statistics in the US and other places. And that's not even touching on things like car accidents, which women are far more likely to be killed by than by a partner or spouse. Now, the wording here is very deliberately done by Jessica Valenti because she wants to create the narrative that the most dangerous thing in the world to a woman is a man, when in reality very few women are murdered, at least compared to the number of men who are being murdered. Let's continue. It's a stark reminder of the danger American women face, from the everyday indignities to the reality of life-threatening violence. It's a hell of a lot more literal and real than the threat of lost power or influence. Now, this is a very, very interesting argument. Often, anti-feminists will say that feminists are more concerned about trivial things in the first world than actual oppression in the third world. And the standard feminist argument in response to this is feminists can battle for both. They can be concerned about women in Saudi Arabia as well as things like manspreading. They can cover the lot. It doesn't have to be only the most extreme things are important, because all these things are important, right? But this argument suddenly changes when you bring up men's issues or men being hard done by something or something affecting men. Suddenly, oh no, we can only deal with the most extreme things. And those most extreme things are always the things, coincidentally, that only affect women, or affect women in the majority of cases. So, sure, yeah, feminists can fight against manspreading because, you know, a man taking up too much room on a train, that's a major issue. But how dare men say that everyone, including men, should have the right to a fair trial and due process? How dare they? Don't they know that women can't sit down on a train during peak hour because there's a man taking up too much space? How dare they ask for due process rights? Who do they think they are? Next. I believe Republican politicians and conservative men when they say that they're afraid of women, afraid of immigrants, afraid of the LGBTQ community, and anyone else who might lessen their long-standing hold on political power. Well, I'm not going to speak for Republicans or conservative men because I'm not a Republican or a conservative. But I do have a fear of losing due process rights. And that has nothing to do with immigrants being afraid of women or LGBTQ community or anything else that she just mentioned. It does concern feminism quite a bit, though. Next. But women aren't willing to let these grasping fears trump our right to live free from violence and with some semblance of equality. Some semblance of equality. Because, you know, women don't have anything near equality yet, do they? Yeah, there's still a long way to go. As long as there is one man manspreading on a train somewhere, women will still be oppressed. As long as there is one man somewhere mansplaining to a woman, women are clearly far, far from equal. If only we could smash the patriarchy and free women from this oppression. She finishes off with, so you know what? Maybe they should be afraid. Truly afraid for once. The only thing I'm afraid of after reading that article, Jessica, is I'm afraid for the future of journalism. Although it would seem that it's already fucking dead.
In autumn 2015, Yakov Malushkin, a taxi driver, made the headlines all over Israel.
Приехал на адрес, зашла женщина и сразу в наглой форме объявляет мне, что она будет курить в машине. У меня работает кондиционер, я сам не курю. Я говорю, выйди из машины.
За что? За то, что ты некрасиво себя ведешь.
Она начала ругаться матом.
Я тебя прошу, я не беру. Ой, угадал.
Хватать меня за руки.
Руки убери, пожалуйста.
Некрасиво я веду себя.
Я позвонил в полицию. Пока я звонил в полицию, она начала кричать, что ее насилуют. Так, чтобы через телефон полиция это слышала. Полиция приехала, наверное, через 3 или 5 минут. Очень быстро.
Вы стараетесь? Ты попал.
שוטר שהגיע לאירוע באופן אוטומטי האמין לה ולא האמין לו. הוא בכלל לא התייחס אליו באותה סיטואציה. מבחינתו, יעקב היה אשם והיא הייתה זאת שהותקפה, היא הייתה הקורבן. לולא הייתה לו את מערכת המצלמות הזאת שהותקנה ברכב שלו, לולא האירוע הזה היה מוסרט בווידאו, יעקב היה מוצא את עצמו מואשם בעבירה חמורה מאוד, והוא היה יושב בכלא בגין העבירה הזאת.
Yakov had bought a dash cam 2 weeks before the incident. He was sick of women threatening him when they didn't want to pay. He once spent several hours driving one such client wherever she wanted to go.
Она говорит, подожди, я сейчас принесу тебе деньги, подымусь. Я говорю, хорошо, оставь какую-то вещь, оставь паспорт или оставь телефон, и можешь идти. Она тут же начала кричать, что ее насилуют. И я решил поставить себе видеорегистратор. И вот, пожалуйста, он помог.
Yakov was sure that he wouldn't need a lawyer this time. At last, women wouldn't be able to threaten him, and blackmailers would be punished. Sadly, it wasn't that simple.
במשטרה באשדוד לא מוכנים אפילו לשמוע על זה שהוא יגיש תלונה כנגד הגברת הזאת, למרות שאני אזכיר, מי שהתקשר בהתחלה למשטרה זה הוא, שהוא בעצם היה כאן הקורבן.
На меня все давили, чтобы я ее посадил, чтобы я ее наказал, так как многие от этого пострадали, но ни у кого как бы не было доказательств. Мне позвонила одна девочка, она сказала, что ее отец получил за точно такое же, ничего не делая, получил 9 лет.